One of the first things I'd like to do is recognize that we are on stolen land. We are actually on the ancestral lands of the Ohlone, and it's important to recognize that this is their land, and we are here because it was stolen from them. I've been vegan for over 30 years, and I started the Vegan Empowerment Project as a way to really help combine and show how various issues of oppression are connected, and how oppression is oppression in whatever form it takes. So I'm going to, my next slide. Okay, so these are the few food justice topics, and I'm going to go kind of fast because there's a lot to cover. Animals raised and killed for food, environmental racism, farm workers, chocolate lures from child labor, access to healthy foods, and most importantly, what you can do. So this is Quincy. This is Quincy, who lives at Woodstock Sanctuary in New York. And I'd like to start out with an adorable critter like Quincy, because for me, Quincy embodies everything as to why we are a vegan organization. We are a vegan organization because Quincy has a right to his own flesh. He has a right to his feathers. He has a right to his entire body without worrying about what humans may intend or want to do with him. Quincy has a right to fresh air, to fresh water, and to fresh grass under his little webbed feet. I'm not going to go too much into how animals are raised and killed for food, because that's what this whole event's about, and I believe Monica is going to be talking about some of that after me. But I always think it's important to talk about cows used in the dairy industry. And one of the reasons is because my nonprofit, we're an international organization, but our headquarters is in Sonoma County, which, if you don't know, right now is actually on fire, which is why my colleague, who was supposed to be here today, she couldn't leave because the fire blockaded one of the roads. And we're getting constant evacuation notices, so it's very real for us right now. But in Sonoma County is where people consider having the happy cows, where the cows are on green pastures. This is a cow named Autumn who lives at Vine Sanctuary in Vermont. And this mama cow has her babies taken away from her pretty much when they are born. Doesn't really matter how big or how small that area is, her babies are going to be taken away from her. Don't know that this sound's going to work. So this is Maddox. So Maddox is exactly a victim of one of these situations where, a lot of times, I've done a lot of investigations of factory farms and slaughterhouses. And I actually have audio of the mom and babies battling back and forth with each other. I have a TEDx talk, y'all can watch it and you can hear the sound of them battling back and forth to each other. But this happens again no matter how big or small that farm is. At the end of the day, they have to separate these babies. So this is actually, the next image is actually an event we've been doing for a year and a half. We've been going in front of where you can see the cows in the background. This is what we've been doing for a year and a half, is actually trying to make people recognize who it is that's being impacted by their food choices. The fact that these cows may be unhappy on quote-unquote green pastures and happy farms, but the reality is that their babies are located in a fence nearby. They're actually kept in confinement to where they can't even take any free steps. That's for the females. But as of this week, we've stopped doing these events. We just did our last one on Wednesday. And the reason why we've stopped doing this is because the vicious attacks that we faced by the dairy itself has forced me to make a very hard decision. I've been punched in the face by cops. I've been arrested dozens of times, all for the animals. But what I can't have is a white farmer threatening the lives of me and my staff, or all women of color. And this farm has threatened us with bodily harm. They've showered us with manure. They've had trucks drive by and shower us with water. And they've also called in false reports of women being kidnapped in the road and accidents taking place there. Now, I'm very, very anti-military, anti-all of that, but we are ceasing doing this not because they have won. We're ceasing doing this because we're going to go somewhere else, and at the end of the day, we're going to win. Because this is an industry that's going down. It's going down not only because of the harm and the cruelty in which they inflict on non-human animals, but because it's an industry that has no place in our society anymore for the sake of the planet, or the workers, or the animals. So I think it's always really important, because a lot of times fish don't get talked about when we talk about animals who are raised and killed for food. In fact, the government tends to view fish, they don't count them like they do other animals. They view them as tonnage. So like this tonnage of animals are killed, for shrimp or fishing. But this little fish changed things a little while ago. Last year, a scientific journal reported that this fish passed what's called a self-awareness test. Right. Y'all know these self-awareness tests they do to dolphins and primates, and they're like, wow, they know it's them. They put a little brown mark on this fish's face, and the little fish went to the sand and wiped the little mark off of his face. He knew what was happening. So he passed the self-awareness test, which is theoretically, for those of us don't really care how smart an animal is, at the end of the day, their intelligence doesn't equate compassion for us. We don't really care how smart this fish is, but for some people it matters. But instead of people recognizing that this little fish had a consciousness about himself, instead of saying we need to rethink about how we should be or should we not be consuming fish, what these scientists did is said, well, we got to change the test now. So it doesn't really matter what animals do, the excuses in which we will be doing things to hurt them will always be changed. And I'll answer questions at the end. So we also have a food empowerment project. We have what we've just started, I guess over a year ago now, called Fight for the Ocean. It's because we don't have the ability anymore to just take a march or take a stand for the ocean. We're going to have to fight for her. Because pretty soon, everything underneath those waves is going to be dead. We have a responsibility. Now, those of us who are vegan, we can say, yeah, we don't consume anything that comes from the ocean and we're doing our part. But that's honestly not enough anymore. We have to do more. We have to go out and we have to clean our beaches, we have to clean our creeks and our rivers. For those people who do the creek cleanups and the beach cleanups, we're kind of saying you need to do more than that. You need to stop consuming animals. Because at the end of the day, those nets that are killing those fish that people want to eat, those are the same nets that are trapping whales and dolphins and sea turtles and dragging them down and drowning them and killing them as well. So this is a fight where we're all going to have to do more. Where we're all going to have to do more to take a stand and protect the ocean. Our Fight for the Ocean Day started, and we always do every year on August 30th. And if you have Netflix, does anybody here have the privilege of having Netflix? I know sometimes it doesn't feel like a privilege, but really, in most cases, it is a privilege. There's a documentary called Mission Blue, and it's about Dr. Sylvia Earle. And we chose August 30th in honor of Dr. Sylvia Earle's birthday. She's still alive. She's in her 80s. She was one of the first women going out and fighting and doing oceanography work in the 1950s. I was struck by the fact that I had never heard of her before, but I'd heard of Jacques Cousteau. I'd heard of a lot of men doing this type of work, but I'd never heard about women. And I'm a Chicana, a very proud Mexican, who wanted to become a marine biologist. And I wonder if I had known about a woman like Dr. Sylvia Earle, would I have pursued it? So part of our job here is not only fight for the ocean, but also make sure that every young girl knows about her. And so if they want to go into a field like that, they have someone as magnificent as her to go into this field with. She talks about in the interview about how she doesn't eat fish. She lived underwater for like 2 weeks, and she said she got to learn the personalities of all the fish, and that made her decide to stop eating them. So how many here are familiar with the term environmental racism? I'm sure probably a lot of people here live with environmental racism because we're in the Bay Area. If you are familiar with Richmond at all, if you've ever driven through Richmond or if you live in Richmond, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And that's when one portion of the population, which are people of color, black and brown and indigenous communities, are more impacted by negative pollutants than whiter and more privileged areas. In Richmond, that's where you have the oil refineries. In Oakland, that's where you have the truck depots. You have all of the freighters coming in. Santa Clara County has tons of areas that are filled with toxic dump facilities caused by the tech industry. So environmental racism is exactly that. When people of color, black and brown people, are more impacted by negative pollutants. And it's the same thing when it comes to factory farming. So in areas like North Carolina, where you have predominantly indigenous community members and black people living, you have black communities who are having regular nosebleeds, headaches. They don't open their windows in the summertime because the flies are so bad. And you have really, their property values are pretty much worthless. Because who's going to want to live next to one of these farms? I investigated pig farms, and it took me like 6 showers to get the smell of the pig farms out of my hair. But I was able to leave, unlike the people who live there, and unlike the cows who will live and die there. So it's similar here in California, where we have some dairy farms. This is actually a photograph from California. You can see all the little dots, those are the cows. Some of our dairy farms in California as large as 17,000, 25,000 cows. So you have the same thing in the Central Valley, where it's predominantly Latinx community members live. Here, think about this. One dairy cow produces 120 pounds of wet manure a day. So even a farm as small as, let's say, 20, what did I do right now? 20 cows. They are releasing 2,400 pounds of wet manure a day. So Latinx community members living in this area have some of the highest rates of asthma in the world, predominantly because of the dairy industry and all the dust and everything that's kicked up. So when talking about these issues, and I've been talking a lot about animals and how they're treated, and animal agriculture and how it impacts people of color, for an organization like ours, essentially we're saying, for the sake of the animals, right, we don't want harm to come to non-human animals, so we want you to go vegan. We want you to stop supporting, if you have access to healthy foods, we want you to stop supporting the suffering of non-human animals. But we can't ignore where our own food comes from. And as an organization, we're asking people to consume more produce, thus putting pressure on farm workers. So farm workers in our country they're getting rights, but it's not much better than it used to be. If you are familiar with the founding of the United Farm Workers by Larry Itleon, Dolores Huerta, and Cesar Chavez, who was a vegan, the conditions are still pretty deplorable. The average lifespan of a farm worker is 49 years old. I'm 49 years old. So my lifespan pretty much would be close to ending now because of the toll it would take on somebody's body to be bending over like this all the time. So farm workers in California, she's doing such a good job, isn't she? You think she heard my talk a million times. She's speaking after me, so I'll have to say it. But basically, farm workers in California, many of them are homeless. They live, and actually, I will say right now, the terror that is inflicting on the farm workers right now in Southern California and in Sonoma County, where we're based, I can't think of right now because I will break down. But we're talking about people who are already left homeless by the fires that happened 2 years ago. They're living in cardboard boxes, they're living along the creeks and the rivers. That was before the fires. We're talking about farm workers who pick grapes for the wine industry. And what does the wine industry do? They throw really nice parties for themselves where they can dress up for galas, raise money for the farm workers instead of paying farm workers living wages. But I digress. Farm workers, many of them can't even afford the food that they're picking. Many of them live in what we call environmental justice areas. The Buena Vista labor camp, which is in Santa Cruz, is located near a correctional facility and a dump. There's been a lot of reports, including from UC Berkeley, that talks about the constant sexual harassment of farm workers and the women regularly that they face. So what we do for farm workers as an organization, we do a school supply drive for the children of farm workers every year. We get school supplies donated from all over the country. These are actually kids in Watsonville. Just this past year, we collected, I think, 678 backpacks with thousands of school supplies. We specifically put the materials in each backpack the same for everybody, except for the older kids get different than the little kids. But they get the same amount of everything because we don't know what bullying may take place. We want everything to be equal so one doesn't feel treated differently from the other. So we just have a couple pictures because there's another one. Because I can never decide because they're all so adorable. So can you go back to the other one? So we deliver to Watsonville, the Central Valley, as well as to Sonoma County. Pretty much all the farm workers we give to are undocumented. The majority are from Oaxaca and Mexico. We also work to change regulations that impact farm workers. Over a year ago, we helped change a regulation in California that required farm workers move 50 miles away from the labor camps when picking season was over, which impacted their children's ability to finish the school year. No longer are they forced to do that since the 1980s. We're now working on a survey of farm workers about the fires, to determine how they are impacted by the fires so we can try to pass some legislation to protect them both professionally and personally. All right. We also ask that people respect the boycotts called by farm workers themselves. So the Coalition of Immokalee Workers has been asking people for many years now, boycott Wendy's. The Immokalee workers are asking for 1 more penny per pound for the tomatoes that they pick, and Wendy's is saying no. So on behalf of them, vegan French fries or not, we're asking you to boycott Wendy's. We're also asking you to please respect the San Quintin farm workers in Mexico, boycott Driscoll berries. If you go to a grocery store that has Driscoll berries, we're asking you to tell them why you will not buy Driscoll berries, and that's because of the wage theft and the sexual harassment inflicted on the workers in San Quintin, Mexico. So one of the other areas that we work on when we're talking about food justice issues is chocolate. Chocolate is a luxury. I know some people may feel like it's a necessity. I can see people over there. But it is a luxury. 70% of the world's cacao comes from Western Africa, where you have children who get there in a variety of ways. Some very poor countries nearby, such as Burkina Faso and Mali, very poor countries. Family members sometimes sell their children or their nieces and nephews into the industry. Other times, the families think their kids are going to actually get work and be able to bring the money back to the family. Many children are also stolen, straight up stolen and trafficked hundreds of miles away to work in the industry. This is actually a picture of, from 2013 of a rainforest certified facility. It's hard to see here, but the little girls have scars on their arms and their legs. Children as young as 7 years old are wielding heavy machetes to try and cut the cacao pods out of the trees. The children are carrying bags of cacao pods that weigh about 40 pounds, and some of these kids are just like 8, 10 years old. If they don't move fast enough, they're beaten. The children are often locked in overnight. So reports have been said that basically when the children try to escape, they are beaten severely, and that's why they lock them in at night. So this is a slide, and this quote actually, when a reporter asked a former slave, what would you say to people who are still eating chocolate? And he said, tell them when they're eating chocolate, they're eating my flesh. I heard that in 2000, and I thought, as a vegan for over 30 years, I thought, this is the same thing as a non-human animal would say. There's no way I can look at chocolate in the same way again. So that's when I decided to stop eating chocolate. And don't worry, we're not going to stay there. But I want to switch over to one more. Our work on chocolate continues regularly. You can look just this week. A report came out from the Washington Post about, again, how none of these certifications are working. A lot of times people say, well, the children are working with their parents. This is a quote from a farm worker in Brazil who says, if I didn't have this rope around my neck, my 12-year-old son who works in the harvest would be studying. It's not as if the parents are wanting their kids to work in this industry. It's because these corporations are not paying the farmers enough to be able to have people to pay to do the work. So just last year, a report came out. Brazil had never been on any list. It's always been Western Africa. Brazil last time was listed as a country where child labor and slavery is becoming more prevalent. So if you used to follow our list, we've expanded it now. We used to recommend some chocolate from Western Africa that were worker-owned cooperatives. We're not anymore because too many reports have come out. And this most recent one from the Washington Post very well damns fair trade in every certification that's out there. So we have a list of chocolates that we recommend on our website. It's so blurry, but basically it's broken down between the ones we feel comfortable recommending. Mixed means the company makes chocolate, but some of it's sourced from places we don't recommend. Some of it we do recommend. You need to read the fine print on our app. Some we don't recommend. When we say they're working on it, that means they're using a certification, but we don't trust the certification. But at least they acknowledge the issue, because so many companies don't even care. And then we don't recommend companies that are not being transparent, which I find absolutely and utterly appalling, that a company thinks they're above and they're more important than being transparent about where their chocolate comes from. Again, we don't use any certifications. Sorry, talk about this. So we have a free app that you can download as well. If you have an iPhone, you can go to our table and just put your camera on our barcode and it'll download automatically. But the chocolate list is in, you know what, I think you have to click twice. They redid my PowerPoint, so now it's all fancy. But the app is free, and we want people to use it. We update this app once a month. Because you contact us and you'll say, hey, I love this vegan chocolate, but I don't see it on your list. We'll contact the company for you. That's how our list is updated now, is by you telling us what companies to look into. Every company has to make at least one vegan chocolate to make our list, which has meant a lot of chocolate companies want to be on our list, and unless they make a vegan chocolate, we have to tell them, you need to make a vegan chocolate, and then they end up. We recently got Nugo. If you haven't ever seen Nugo bars, they just switched to chocolate we recommend. And they're fantastic. Conscious Creamery that's here, they also use chocolate that we recommend. They're actually using Equal Exchange. Google Play. So it's on the Android and it's on the iPhone. So this is when it's always really important for me to remind people that just because something's vegan doesn't mean it's cruelty-free. If the chocolate's coming from the hands of slavery or child labor, it's not cruelty-free. It's vegan, but it's not cruelty-free. So one of the last areas of food justice and that we work on is lack of access to healthy foods in Black and brown communities. This goes for indigenous communities as well. A lot of times people call these food deserts. We call it food apartheid. A lot of us have decided we need to quit greenwashing, for lack of a better term, this very serious issue and just be upfront about what it is. And speaking of the anti-apartheid movement, if any of you have studied it or you haven't, I really encourage everybody to learn about Steve Biko. He was an amazing advocate during the anti-apartheid movement, murdered by their regime, but he was an incredible leader. So basically, these are areas where you have more fast food, more liquor stores, and not a lot of access to fresh fruits and fresh vegetables. You have higher rates of diabetes in these areas. Next slide. So this is not just a U.S. problem, this is an international problem. I've spoken in, New Zealand, where the Maori are most impacted. I've spoken in Canada, where it's the First Nations people. In Australia, where it's the Aborigines. But basically, it's pretty much Black and brown and indigenous communities that are the most impacted by these problems. And this is where I'll also stop to say that this is where vegans need to stop saying it's easy to be vegan. Because it's not easy for everybody to be vegan. Because not everybody has the same access to fruits and vegetables that more privileged and more affluent people do. That is absolutely the reality. So our work started when I moved in this area, when I moved to San Jose, where I lived downtown and I worked downtown. And I had 2 liquor stores across the street from each other, in where I worked and where I lived. And as you all know, Santa Clara County is where abundant wealth is, right? We know who's based there, right? We know Adobe's based there, Apple's based there. So yet we have this problem. It's actually where Cesar Chavez got his organizing start, because that's where all the orchards were. This is where all the canneries were. So I was wondering, is this community that I live in with so much wealth, is it really an area where that lacks access to healthy foods? Okay, I knew it, because they're Black and brown. So what we decided to do is we gathered up, at that time we were all volunteer. We gathered up our volunteers and we physically surveyed high-income areas and low-income areas in Santa Clara County and made a comparison on access to fresh, frozen, and canned fruits and vegetables, as well as meat and dairy alternatives. And what we found wasn't surprising in the sense that in the higher-income areas, they had 14 times more access to frozen vegetables than in the communities of color. We also found that a lot of the places, if it was pretty much everybody is getting their food from liquor stores. And if they had fruits and vegetables there, they didn't have prices on them. So it was basically up to whoever was behind the counter how much they were going to charge them for those fruits and vegetables. It also meant that if you didn't speak English, you were at an automatic disadvantage than anybody who spoke English from being able to get those fruits and vegetables. So after doing this, we decided to do focus groups. Because one of the problems that happens is that many well-intentioned NGOs, public officials go into black and brown communities and they say, this is what you need, this is what you need to do. And then it fails and they blame it on our communities. So we decided, let's do focus groups, ask the community what they need and what they want. And so we put out our report on our findings, and our next report. And one of the biggest barriers that we found in doing this work and accessing healthy foods was the cost of the food. And as an organization that already doesn't want prices to go down because farm workers already aren't being paid enough, we know what we've decided to do, you can go to the next one instead of that, is fight for living wages. If we want everybody to go vegan, we need everybody who wants everybody to go vegan needs to be responsible for fight for living wages. Because there's no equity right now in our system. Black and brown people are the majority. Single blonde black women are the ones who are working in our fast food. They're working in our restaurants. So we need to fight for living wages across the board, whether it be for our city, our state, Walmart workers, restaurant workers, fast food workers. That's the only way we can create equity. And that's the only way people are going to actually be able to afford fresh fruits and fresh vegetables, is by getting living wages out there. We also found that a lot of the people living in these communities had vegan children. We also found that many of them ate healthier in their home countries than they did in the United States. Because instead of being able to grow their own tomatoes, they were forced to be able to have to use tomato sauce for cooking. So Food Empowerment Project is an organization that follows environmental justice principles, meaning we don't go into somebody else's community unless they've asked us, the impacted community wants us to be there. So I decided to meet with David Hilliard, one of the founding members of the Black Panther Party, to learn more about their absolutely incredible, critical work that they did with a free breakfast program that they did. And in speaking with David Hilliard about it, he asked us to take a look at what access to healthy food was like in his community, which is in Vallejo. So we looked at that community. Is everybody here familiar with Vallejo? So basically, it is different than the entire rest of Solano County. Vallejo is made of both black, brown, and basically black, Filipinx, and Latinx community members. That is who makes up that community. The rest of the county is pretty white. It's Solano County, it's very rural, whereas Vallejo is very urban. So we decided we just wanted to look at Vallejo. So we surveyed every single establishment, minus restaurants and fast food, for access to healthy foods. And we found that 88%, go to the next one, that's probably easier. Oh yeah, there it is up on top. That, guess that talks about 88% of all the liquor stores and 71% of all the convenience stores were located in low-income communities. We also found that the vast majority of people living in these communities were getting their food from convenience stores and liquor stores. So when we did our survey, obviously we surveyed for the fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, but we also surveyed for meat and dairy alternatives. One, because we don't want harm to happen to non-human animals. Two, because we all know in a diet, and more fruits and vegetables is better for your health. But in addition to that, we also know that colonization had a devastating impact on many of our peoples. As a Mexican, my ancestors did not consume the milk of cows or goats until Columbus brought them over on the fourth voyage. That's why a lot of us who are black and brown don't digest cow's milk or goat milk. Now, for Food Empowerment Project, we have decided that the word lactose intolerant is not fair. It puts the onus on people of color as if there's something wrong with us. And frankly, there's nothing wrong with us for not being able to digest the milk of another species. So we actually say we're lactose normal, right? It's colonization that messed with our lives, messed with our culture, messed with our lands, and everything that we're about. So we are lactose normal, and everybody else who has that deficiency that can digest cow's milk, that's their problem. But this is why we are very strong about this because it's also, when we talk about it being a food apartheid, it's because what is being pushed into our communities is food that's not only unhealthy for us, but harms us, right? Dairy harms our system, and it makes our kids have stomach aches and problems like that. So what we're doing, actually go to the next slide. One of the other things we found out was that Safeway grocery store was located in downtown, where you had a senior living facility and black and brown people living there. They relocated, they moved away, they relocated a few miles away, and when they left, they put what's a restrictive deed on their property saying no grocery store could move here for 15 years. They have done this in Washington State. Right now in Bellingham, there's a current one for 20 years. They're doing this all over the country, primarily impacting black and brown communities and older people. That's pretty much the communities that they're hurting the most. So we have a petition that we're asking people to sign, and please share. We know if our petition was about animals, we'd have 100,000 signatures. It's about helping people. We don't have 100,000 signatures. So we're asking you to please sign and share our petition. It's on our website, and we also have it that you can just sign at our table. We have a table, sign the petition. We just need to demand this corporation stop impacting the health of communities.
But what about the planning commissions? Can the planning commissions change that?
No, but maybe you can ask that later. I'm going to have some time for Q&A. So what we've done in Vallejo, what we're trying to do is trying to create a better system, right? But we don't believe in grocery stores like Walmart being the solution or anybody like that. Our communities are the solution. So we did focus groups. This is one of our focus group crews. You can go to the next one. Where we serve vegan food. So I should say, in both focus groups that we did in San Jose and in Vallejo, we served everybody vegan food. We also paid everybody $50 for their time, because their knowledge is worth something. And we don't just expect brown and black people to give us their wisdom without compensation. So the next slide, this is our report. We have all of our reports are online, but you can also pick this one up at our table. We worked with a local university, because I'm an activist, right? I'm not smart academic, I can't crunch numbers, but we're lucky to have universities who do it with us. So the next slide, just really quickly, same issues came up that came up in San Jose. Affordability. They can't afford the healthy food. Next slide, thanks, Monica. Is simply, again, that they can't even get the fresh fruit that many of them are used to. So when we're looking at these issues, we're looking at what are some of the solutions. Next one. One of the solutions is people growing their own food. And why is that? Because they're not on a system that was never made for them to succeed. Capitalism and corporations never are really looking out for black and brown people. They're looking at how to make money off of us. But if we can grow our own food, we can be off a system like that and be empowering ourselves. Now, I'm someone who's only ever rented my whole life. I've never owned property. So what's the solution? We work with Vallejo People's Gardens, started by an amazing Filipina. It's an incredible oasis in that community. Okay, so me, I've never lived anywhere. I can't even grow my basil. So next slide is what we also see is one of the most important solutions, and that's worker-owned cooperatives. Not cooperatives member-driven, but those cooperatives that are owned by the workers. So we're currently working with Mandela Grocery to try and have Mandela Grocery in Vallejo, where those people who live there and who work there will gain the profits, and they will be the ones helping their community to thrive. Walmart, where does all that profit go? Back to Arkansas. Well, in a profit-driven situation, if a worker-owned cooperative is there, all that profit's going to stay in the community and it's going to help. We have this woman named Cookie, and she's like so excited for her grandchildren to be able to work at that cooperative once we get it off the ground. This is Adriana from Mandela, who's been, and I think I probably have a slide later on, yeah, where we actually, thank you, we actually did we did 6 focus groups in Vallejo. Only one of them had anybody ever heard of a worker-owned cooperative, which happened to be Cookie. So these are her children and grandchildren. So we decided to do 3 meetings in Vallejo, just talking about what worker-owned cooperatives is. Having Adriana come out and talk about the decisions that they made, about seniors getting 50% off produce. So we served more vegan food, and we talked to everybody about worker-owned cooperatives, and that's where we're at right now in Vallejo, is trying to get that worker-owned cooperative off the ground. We also do the Vallejo Healthy Food Fest every year, which is about the community. So if you're from a group that asked us if you could table at the Vallejo Healthy Food Fest, it's for the community. So we don't really allow anybody just to come to the community. We have Chef Chu. We have 3 different chefs providing culturally appropriate foods. Chef Chu, who owns Veg Hub in Oakland, he lives in Vallejo. They're actually manufacturing their vegan meats there. We also have Vegan Mom, who did vegan Filipino cooking demo, and Chef Evangelina doing Mexican food, vegan Mexican food. So we have people who are attending their first vegan event. Again, this is free for the community. If people want to come in from outside the community, they get charged $5. But for people in the community, it's absolutely free because it's done to celebrate them and the vibrancy of that community. We put my first vegan event because we're pretty sure everybody's had peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, so we don't want to say my first vegan meal. So food is free for them all day long. We have performances from the community. So these are flamenco dancers, but we have just all sorts of different people from the community performing and celebrating the community. Okay, so most importantly, what can you do? If you have access to healthy foods, go vegan. And if you're vegan, just see how easy that is. You know, you just have to one little cause about like if you have access to healthy foods, go vegan, versus saying it's easy for everybody to go vegan. Shop with care. Try not to support companies that hurt human and non-human animals, like boycott Coca-Cola, boycott Nestle, boycott Monsanto. Lend your voices to the farm workers by supporting the campaigns. Support our school supply drive and honor the boycotts. Choose organic. So if you're vegan, you know, if somebody says, oh, but the milk is vegan, you're like, yeah, but it doesn't mean the cow's treated any better. Similar situation for the farm workers. Doesn't mean they're treated any better, but they're not being doused with agricultural chemicals, and that is a good thing. Please use our chocolate list. Again, we update it every month. Please avoid using plastic water bottles, single use. Bring your own. Buy local, supporting especially black and brown farmers. Support living wages. Check out, you can go to our website if we have more on bananas, coffee, wine, and palm oil. Speak out about food injustices. Fill out comment, oh, we need to fix that. All right, we'll get to that. Use comment cards. You do not know how powerful your voice is, right, when you go into grocery stores. Get involved. We have a lot you can work on with us. And we have an e-newsletter. You can sign up on our website or on our table. Spread the word. Okay.
That's so many
So our
things.
website is in English and in Spanish. Everything and more is on our website. The next one I think is just showing you it's in Spanish. Then we have vegan Mexican food booklets in English and in Spanish as well. If you want a Spanish one, it's free. If you want an English one, we're asking for $3 to $5 donation. We have some at our table. It's all on our website. And then we have, that's peeling the truth back on bananas. And then the next one is coffee. We do have a short list of coffee we recommend and an even shorter list of bananas that we recommend. Bananas are very problematic. We also have veganmexicanfood.com. If you keep, so everybody on my staff really likes food. I look at food as a tool for social change. But if you keep tabbing, you're going to see all the pictures of the food they put up. So we have veganmexicanfood.com in English and in Spanish. And we also have vegan Filipino food in English and Tagalog. Our next website is Vegan Lao Food. One of our board members is Lao, so she'll be repping that. And my colleague who couldn't make it because of the fires, she's Filipina. So basically, I know this can seem very overwhelming. There's a lot here. But what I hope people will do is not feel overwhelmed, but look at these as opportunities. There's a lot of suffering, a lot of tragedy going on in our lives right now. And if we can figure out different ways that we can make a difference, we eat several times a day. That is time and time again where we can make a big difference, not only for non-human animals, but human animals as well. And we have a responsibility to think about those food choices and what we like to say to eat our ethics. To really make sure that everything you put in your mouth, that you make a decision, does this meet what I believe in? And if it doesn't, then don't buy it. So I think, do I have time for questions?
Yeah, 4 minutes.
I have 4 minutes for questions.
I'm curious about how Safeway gets away with a law like that or a rule like that.
Yeah, so they put it in their deeds, so whoever's buying that is already in the deed. So basically, if somebody comes and says, I want to buy that property, then it's in the deed, and the person knows who's selling it. If you can't make it into a grocery store.
And basically, the government can't do anything to stop Safeway from putting that in the deed.
No. Well, there's nothing illegal about it. We've had lots of attorneys look into. There's nothing illegal. We're trying to do ordinances to pass that. But the problem with that, which we will do, but the problem with that is they're doing this all over the country. So to be able to do every city is impossible. So that's why we went to corporation to make that change, because it impacts everybody all over the country.
What is that bananas?
Bananas?
Yeah.
Bananas are full of colonization, sexism, and you name it.
Is it?
We recommend a few banana companies, Equal Exchange, but we know it's hard to get Equal Exchange out here. They're the ones that we feel comfortable recommending 100%. We don't really have a lot on the West Coast, but they're trying to change that. So Grow is another company that we recommend. And then the other one is Earth University bananas. Those are only at Whole Foods, so if you don't shop at Whole Foods like me, Grow bananas are going to be your pick. But it is hard to find, but really, Chiquita and Dole are just some of the worst corporations out there. They just are really bad.
Even if they're organic?
Even if they're organic. Their practices and how they treat people in these other countries is just shocking.
They kill human beings.
Yeah. Anybody else? Well, thanks for coming. There's more information on our table